This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Well, greetings, everyone, to our readers, our viewers, our listeners, everybody's welcome. This is Joyce Davis. I'm PennLive's Outreach and Opinion Editor, and this is Battleground PA. Today, we are going to talk about what I'm told is one of the most important topics facing voters in the 2024 elections, and that is the topic of immigration. I say that it's important to voters because the truth is, among the letters and the opinion articles that I'm getting from our readers, I'm not getting a lot of negatives, at least about immigration. I'm not getting people railing over all of these folks here who are illegal. I'm just not getting that in Pennsylvania. It makes me wonder if these issues are not as volatile in our Commonwealth as they may be in other places. But you know what? I have an expert here who with me to share some of these insights, and that is Sarah Towle. Am I saying your name correctly, Sarah? What's the last name?
Yes, that's
All
correct.
Right.
Sarah Towle.
And Sarah is here because she is going to actually be in our region very soon, before the end of the month, invited by, I think, a coalition of faith leaders and churches to talk about immigration. And Sarah is the author of Crossing the Line, Finding America in the Borderlands. Finding America in the Borderlands. That is intriguing, Sarah. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about you, about your work, and about this most intriguing book.
Sure. Thank you so much, Joyce, and Battleground PA for having me on the show. I really, really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm honored to be invited. I am an international educator and an economic migrant, although I get to call myself an expatriate because of my passport and skin color. But I am someone who's made a career of offering welcome to newcomers and dignity to asylum seekers and refugees as an English language and literacy educator, a teacher trainer, conflict resolution and communications, cross-cultural communication specialist, writing coach. I've taught across the age span in myriad classroom contexts, including under the trees in refugee settings, such as El Salvador in the era of the dirty wars. But I didn't really understand the depth of the brokenness, in quotes, of our immigration system until 6 years ago in June 2018, when the cries of 6-year-old Alison Jimena Valencia Madrid were heard around the world. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you heard it too, right? A small child made to memorize the phone number in a moment of panic when her mother realized they were about to be pulled apart. A 6-year-old made to grow up all too fast, begging a border official to please call her auntie, reciting the number over and over and over through tears while other children cried in the background, and the agent callously referred to their heartbreak as an orchestra without a conductor. That 8-minute muffled recording was taken, we think, from the pocket of a whistleblower inside the border prison in McAllen, Texas. These prisons are euphemistically called detention centers or processing centers, but they're high security prisons. And the recording was obtained by a Rio Grande Valley civil rights attorney named Jennifer Harbury, who looms large in my book, and who passed it to journalist Ginger Thompson at ProPublica, who passed it to us. And when we heard Alison Jimena's cries, we rose up in collective outrage. We took spontaneous action. In days, we were marching together under the banner, Families Belong Together, all over the world, 750 demonstrations around the globe, 600 in the US alone. And on June 20, 2018, the practice was supposedly ended by presidential Sharpie. But let's face it, it didn't really end, and it didn't begin with him. It's a practice that's been part of the dehumanizer's playbook since the dawn of time. And I, at that time, was not just ashamed of my country, but I was ashamed at myself because, as I said, I've been working with refugee populations all my career since the sanctuary movement of the 1980s. And I felt like if I didn't know that our system had gotten to a point where it could do this, if I didn't know, then a lot of other people didn't know as well. So family separation was the inciting incident that propelled me on a journey across the 2,000-mile US-Mexico line that resulted in my book. I have a copy of it.
Yes, let's see a copy of it. Yes, Crossing the
In the
Line.
line, Finding America in the Borderlands. Some have called it a cross between Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness and Cheryl Strayed's Wild, but the journey of discovery in this case is between me and my motherland, not me and my mother. It begins in a refugee encampment just across from Brownsville, Texas, in Matamoros, Mexico, an encampment that was created and manufactured by US foreign policies or US immigration policies, and created a humanitarian crisis that did not need to happen. And it ends on a mass deportation flight to the West African country of Cameroon, a deportation flight the likes of which one of our candidates is promising to make a daily occurrence. And I'm here to tell you that that description of what happens on any deportation plane on any day is not pretty. It is our government, our federal agencies under the Department of Homeland Security are committing gross human rights violations every day on these planes, but it's hidden in plain sight. It's hidden away from all of us. And one of the things that I discovered in this journey of awareness as to the brokenness of our system is that it actually began right around the time of my birth and grew up all around us, hiding in plain sight. It's a bipartisan project. Presidents and administrations on both sides of the aisle contributing to an objective of making end runs around the 1951 Refugee Convention, around the 1967 Convention Protocol, and around the 1980 Refugee Act, all as a way to stop people from asking for asylum. The law is, of course, that as soon as you set foot on US territory, no matter how you arrived and no matter how many countries you passed through, you have the international right and the legal right to request protection from persecution, and the country, the nation state to which you're requesting that protection, in this case, the US, has the legal obligation to look into that claim and adjudicate it. So all of these methodologies of that have grown up all around me, hiding in plain sight, what I call the border industrial complex, are an effort to make an end run around our own legal obligations as a nation. The whole thing is built on a single theory. The whole thing being mass and indefinite incarceration of peace-seeking people, this deportation machinery, the policing zone that encircles our entire country, the interior policing by ICE, all of this is built on a single theory. And that theory is called prevention through deterrence. It's fitting that we're having this conversation today because the operation, the legal test, if you will, of prevention through deterrence was kicked off 30 years ago yesterday on October. Yeah, okay. On October 1st, 1994, and it's called, it goes like this. If we make northward migration as painful and perilous and dangerous and destructive, deathly as possible, then it will send a signal to would-be crossers, do not come, do not come. But it's never, ever worked. It's an abject, miserable failure. Because
one of the things that I think you point out is that people don't do this just for a family vacation. They do it out of absolute sheer desperation. No one leaves their home and goes through all that torturous travel. Even modern travel is torturous on a jetliner. They don't do that. unless
No,
there's really some life or death compulsion that
correct,
forces you out. And I
correct.
think that's the message that you're bringing. But I have to just interrupt you here, Sarah, because Central Pennsylvania is a peculiar place, right? It is. Some would say that it is. Let's say a very middle of the road. We are a battleground, right? We are a
Yeah.
battleground. But I
Yes.
think we're also that we know that in the country, and I'm seeing these polls that show, rightly or wrongly, because I've come to suspect polls as you have, as all have, that more than half of Americans seem to be okay with mass deportations, with this whole talk of just kicking them out. How do you respond to that, Sarah?
I think that we have the Overton window of what is normal with regard to immigration and immigration strategies has, because of this 40-year bipartisan project to keep people out versus uh, upholding our international obligations, has shifted so far to the right. The Overton window has shifted so far to the right that these extreme opinions that are not based in fact and in reality and in a more complex, nuanced understanding of the issues have become normalized. And unfortunately, that normalization has taken place through media outlets that are providing, lying to the public and lying again and again and again. And we know from psychological studies that all the average person has to hear a thing, whether it's true or false, 13, 15 times in succession before they just sort of take it on as gospel. So I think that there is a particular ideological force at foot in our country that is based in white supremacy, that um, is, has revivified the great what has come to be called the Great Replacement theory, but that's not a new way of thinking. This is exactly the way of thinking that was alive and well in the 1920s, that led to the creation of the Border Patrol. The original Border Patrol was created specifically to exclude people. It was built on the backs of the mounted guard of Chinese inspectors who were created specifically to hunt Asian people, check their documents through racial profiling, and kick them out by virtue of Congress's very first ever immigration law, the Chinese Exclusion Act, which didn't even try to couch its racism in clever terms. So that was one xenophobic response, right, that led to the creation of the Border Patrol. And it should be said, in contrast to the general narrative in the zeitgeist, which is Biden's open borders, or as we heard from J.D. Vance last night, Harris's open borders, ridiculous, and she's not the president. But the borders have not been open to people since then, 100 years ago. And they were closed up again even further in our last xenophobic wave, kind of following the Cold War, the fall of the Cold War, when NAFTA opened the borders to goods and money in January 1994. The State Department realized, and it is documented, that those economic policies would create displacement south of the border and drive more people to the southern border. So they created Operation Gatekeeper. 1994, October 1st, 1994, Operation Gatekeeper instituted this prevention through deterrence model that began the building of the walls. And by walls, I don't just mean physical structures, but also bureaucratic structures, technological structures. In every way, shape, and form, our border became thickened and hardened and more violent at that point. And that was even before 9/11. And then 9/11, put that on steroids and made the excuse to couple this idea of security with northward migration. And that's what we've got today. We've got this entrenched ideological belief system that suggests, that wants us to believe that as long as new people come, we are not secure, and they should be decoupled, because people who are running, as you said, from crushing poverty or from horrors and other harms that were not, not caused by them, those who are running to the so-called promised land, the so-called beacon of hope, in order to find dignity and safety as per their human right, are stopped by this obsession with security that has kind of taken over our national soul since 9/11, and made us believe, or with the help of the Fox News propaganda machine, made people believe in, or stirred up a moral panic that newcomers are terrorists and criminals and perverts coming for your wives and your jobs. And honestly, of all the people that I've met, the hundreds of people that I've interviewed, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yep, yep. Well, I'll tell you, one of our star reporters, Evie De Jesus, has just done, I think, a two-part series looking at absolute benefits that Pennsylvania has reaped and continues to reap from migrant labor in particular, but all of the incredible talent and energy that has been brought, particularly now by, not just particularly by all immigrants, but this Latino community now is on fire. With leadership, with business, with ideas, and is poised to really be a powerful player in our region, and so that kind of counters this narrative that immigrants are, or destructive as opposed to constructive, as we all know, and as you argue, I'm sure, that we are a nation of immigrants, right? But
Yeah.
let me ask you this before we go on to more about this fascinating research and facts that you're sharing with us. You're coming here to our region. Tell us about that. Tell us when you'll be here, why you're here, who invited you. Give us the facts.
Sure, sure. So I am on tour with my book. I have been on tour with my book since it launched in early June. And it's kind of a GOTV effort. It's more that than it is like book sales focused. I'm trying to counter the narrative that's in the zeitgeist at the moment with stories, because stories have the ability to touch hearts and change minds, a lot more so than just drilling into facts and creating charts do. And the most wonderful um, the hope that I really have found hope in the public, in the U.S. Public at large, because every event that I've done has led to another event. And at this point, I'm just accepting invitations. At this point, I have events all the way through to Thanksgiving. And at that point, I hope maybe to go home and sleep in my own bed. Um, but in the meantime, I'm just thrilled at folks reaching out to me and saying, we want you in our community. We want to edify our public, and we want you to tell us what's really going on. I truly, truly feel on the part of the American public across the nation that folks understand they're being lied to on this issue. Folks understand that this open closed border binary, or the good bad immigrant binary, that none of this is nuanced and appropriate to really explain this situation. So I'm gratified that people have been inviting me. And in your community, I have a couple of events. I'll be in the Skillman, New Jersey, Skillman, Princeton region on the 29th at the Charles Bartolomeo Church, I believe is how you pronounce it. And then on the 30th of October, I've been invited by Grace Methodist Church in Harrisburg, and a
United
whole
Methodist, yeah, right on State Street in Harrisburg.
exactly, and a whole other coalition of faith-based organizations and immigrants' rights groups that they've pulled together. And we're having a a three-part event that day. It will start at Grace Church, which, as you said, is right across the street from the state capitol. That'll begin with a focus on the issues from 2 to 4 at the church. And then we're going to march to the Capitol steps and have a silent vigil from 4 to 5. Everyone is invited. And then we're going back to the church for a community soup supper that we all create and sit down and break bread together. It's great to have reservations for that so we know how much food to prepare. And then from that'll be 5:30, and then from 6:30, I'm going to engage folks who've read the book or parts of it in a kind of book club talk. So like I said, I'm just super gratified at this point. Every time I wake up, I find another email of another organization in Pennsylvania that signed on. So pretty good sign for a battleground swing state. There, there
Well,
are actually there are actually a growing number of people who are joining what has started out as being just a thing between me and Grace Methodist Church and is now exploding into a multi-organization day of education and awareness building.
well, I think it's wonderful that somebody who's actually stepped back and all of the history that even just in this short conversation that you've shared should be an eye opener, really, for people to understand what is going on. And listen, I can't say that anybody is against protecting our borders so that the right people come in. But I'd like you, as we close a little bit, to talk a little bit about the system. I mean, everyone talks about a broken immigration system. And so, how is that impacting this? How does a person who has a legitimate need for a safe haven, how do they approach America? What's the right way to do it that they will be received?
Right. Well, there's lots of different right ways. The Unfortunately, systematically, administration after administration after administration has removed many of the right ways. So we've kind of bottlenecked everybody into this one way. So, if you're not, coming over on a student visa or a work visa, an HB1, 2 work visa, if you're not, somebody who's being sponsored by an employer. So that's one aspect of immigration that we hardly really talk about. The real, hue and cry about immigration is really focused on those who are coming to the southern border. And those who are coming to the southern border are literally, in the UN's terms, the world's most vulnerable people. And the only way, the only means, the only pathway that they have that could be considered right is by asking for asylum. Will many of them be eligible for asylum? That requires adjudication, and it's a process that should take about a year. But because our successive administrations have so hollowed the system out, it's taking 8, 10, many more years than it should, depending on the jurisdiction. So that does complicate things because people come in, they ask for asylum, they're living amongst us, they're marrying US citizens, they're having US citizen children, they're becoming incredible positive members of our community. And then, oops, actually, you're not eligible. We need to deport you now. Families are being separated and flung apart. So the system is definitely broken and in need of huge overhaul, not just reform, but rethinking soup to nuts.
Sarah,
But
I have to go ahead. I'm sorry.
just one last point, but the brokenness
Mm.
that politicians and pundits love to point to is working just fine for the
Mm.
demagogues and profiteers to benefit from the system and the entrenched moneyed interests that have kept this system from being updated or even reformed, if reformed is even possible. I doubt that. For these 40 years.
Yeah, I was simply going to say that, I get the impression, and it may be a wrong one, and I get the impression that so many people are opposed to even someone asking for asylum. that they
Yes,
don't even want them the ability to be able to take advantage of what might be there to protect them.
that's correct. I think that, again, like security and immigration being intertwined wrongly by our propaganda machinery, by our disinformation machinery, we've also somehow found us an entrenched coupling of asylum and illegality. They don't belong together. Asking for asylum is never illegal. It is an international right, and it has been since post-World War shame of turning Jewish refugees back to their deaths in Nazi concentration camps. That's why we have the 1951 Refugee Convention and the refugee protection regime that is not being upheld by any of the world's leadership. So that coupling has to be undone, and we need to realize that the real issue is not the only question that our administration, that our government has been asking for decades is, how do we stop them? When we should be asking, why are so many people on the run? 1 in every 100 persons on the planet right now today are displaced forcibly and on the run from harm, horror, or hunger. And we have a large part, a large role, a large responsibility for that. Our foreign and economic policies dating back decades, if not centuries, have created the conditions for human displacement. But we're not willing to look at what are those root causes and change the way we operate to ensure that people not only have the right to move, but have the right to stay home. Because as you said, no one wants to put themselves on the back of La Bestia. No one wants to walk through the Darien Gap holding their children in their arms. No one wants to put their child in a dinghy and go out into the Caribbean Sea. No one wants to walk through the Sonoran Desert without water. These are real life tragic ramifications of our immigration policies that are causing the death and destruction of dreams and families every day. And all we're asking is, how do we stop them?
Yeah.
When we are the United States of America, we
We
know
can do anything.
we can do anything, as President Biden says, if we
Right.
put
We
our
can do it.
minds to it. We
But
have the best surveillance systems in the world. We know how to determine who's a bad actor and who's a child in need. And we're
yeah.
not, when we're not doing that.
Well, one final thought I want to ask you to just comment on, because you're, again, kudos to you. You're a wealth of historic information and facts. So we appreciate that, and our readers will. But
Thank
should this just be, and even though it's at our border, should this just be an American issue, or should there be some sort of cooperative regime or cooperative initiative that these are people in need? They could be dispersed with human methods to places around the world able to receive them. What
Yeah.
about some sort of worldwide refugee effort?
I love that question so much, and you're the first person to ask it. The reason I love it is that this is a global problem. My book only focuses the lens on the US-Mexico border, but it does end in Cameroon, as I said. And I live in the UK, and I lived in Europe for 10 years. And I'm here to tell you, this is a worldwide problem with the wealthiest nations on the planet building a border industrial complex that encircles the globe like a second equator and has created a global apartheid. And all of us in lockstep with the US, the so-called leader of the free world, leading by example to do the wrong thing. And we really need to do the right thing. Now, why aren't we doing the right thing as a global leadership? Well, there's lots of reasons for that, but one of them that I'll end with is that we've put the responsibility for managing refugee protection into the hands of an organization that was created to maintain the sovereignty and the rights of nations. I'm talking about the UN. So I personally believe that we do need an entirely new global structure, that we can't ask the same organization that was built to keep nation states intact. We can't also ask them to support the rights of those rendered stateless by virtue of having left their borders. It's not mutually compatible anymore.
I see that point. I really see that point, because the nations they're coming from are basically responsible for pushing them out, and the nations
Exactly.
they're trying to get to are blocking their. So you're right. It's conflict of interest on all. That makes sense, Sarah. So add that to your talking points. That's a good one. Yeah.
And quite frankly, that intersects and is also true of the climate crisis, right? And they're completely inextricably linked. So we need a whole other mechanism that is not nation-based focused, that is more commons focused, to even begin to tackle this problem. Before we go, I want to just have a shout out to another Pennsylvanian who I just met at the Brooklyn Book Fair, named Zeke Hernandez. He's a professor at the Wharton School, and he just published a book, came out right about the time mine did, called, I can't remember exactly the title, so forgive me, Zeke, but it's something along the lines of the nations that do succeed are the nations that embrace newcomers. So he makes a real economic case for why immigration has always been a net positive for all nations that embrace newcomers to their shores. So
Yeah, I think Zeke Hernandez's book is The Truth About Immigration.
There it is.
And
There it
it's
is.
published by Macmillan, which published my book. So this is a good book. It's they're good editors there. So thank you.
Yes.
It's The Truth About Immigration by Zeke Hernandez. And guess what? You've now given me another guest to invite on Battleground PA. Well,
That was
Sarah,
my intention.
well, Sarah Towle, thank you. Thank you so much. And honestly, kudos to you for the
Thank you.
good work that you are doing for humanity. And I say that with all sincerity. You will be helping probably millions of people if we can open some minds, I think, and get to our leaders the importance of really addressing this issue from a humanitarian, not simply a keep my money in my pocket position. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just one final thought: to do that, we need to make sure that one candidate is thwarted in November, but that the other one, that we hold her feet to the fire and we say, we have to do better. This is not the nation we want to be. The hope of those coming knows no borders, and our cruelty in the face of their hope is not okay.
There you go. There you go. And you're right. If you don't keep the pressure on, people have a tendency to bend to where the pressure does come from. So I get
Correct.
it. And Sarah, you really, it's been a delightful conversation. Although can't say delightful, it's a tough conversation to have.
Exactly.
But you're a delightful presenter, and we really appreciate your taking the time. I look forward to seeing you, because I will be in that crowd when you're
Yay!
here. Okay, I will see
I was
you.
going to ask you.
I will make the plans to spend the entire day with you.
I can't wait to meet you, Joyce, for reals. Thank you so much for having me, and back at you, all that you're doing as well to save our democracy. I'm so grateful.
Well, and thank you. We thank our readers, our viewers, and our listeners. And I will see you next week on another Battleground PA. Bye-bye, Sarah. See you soon.
Bye.